The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. Without further ado, we would like now to hand over to counsel for Mr. Nguyen Chi to continue putting questions to this witness.
Thank you, Mr. President. And if I may, just give everyone on the stage an indication of where I am in my examination and where we are in our examination. I believe I have approximately 30 more minutes of questioning. My colleague, Major Sanarun, informs me that he has about 40 minutes himself. I believe, and I just want to confirm this, that the defense collectively has an entire day with this witness and perhaps more, given the flexibility that was shown to our colleagues across the stage. So I don't think we'll have any problems fitting all of our questioning into that day plus, if necessary. And I will move as quickly as I can now. Mr. Witness, welcome back. Again, good morning. Turning back to the question that I attempted to start just before the break. You, again, discussed this final trip that your father took to Phnom Penh with Judge Laverne, and I'm asking you some questions about it myself. So I have one more question about that. Do you know, or were you informed by your father or anyone else as to the reasons given for that journey, the purpose of that journey? Why, in other words, was your father invited to Phnom Penh on that particular occasion?
Response: I don't know about this. I only accompanied him because it was my duty to do so.
Thank you. And now I would like to confront you with something. I'm going to make reference to one of your statements to the OCIJ, and this one is E3/58. And I'm looking now at page 4 of that document in English, page 4, and that's English ERN 00250089, the Khmer ERN 00239937, and the French ERN 00283915. Now, in this document, as this document reflects to us, to all of us, to the parties, to the chamber, there's an exchange between you and the investigator who prepared that statement, or the investigators and translator who prepared that statement, regarding this event that we've been talking about. However, there's a bit that was left out of the answer you gave. And we know this because we have audio records of these interview sessions. And unfortunately, as we've seen over the course of this trial, often, far too often, the written records don't reflect what actually transpired, what was actually said completely. We've had, quite frankly, we've had serious problems with this over the course of the trial. Now, the judges don't seem too concerned about this. They haven't taken an interest in these problems at all. However, it is important for us, it's very important for us as defense counsel to be able to confront you with what you've actually said and not what is oftentimes reflected in these statements. Now, as a matter of fact, turning back to my question, as a matter of fact, you told the investigators, you may not recall it, you told the investigators that your father was called to Phnom Penh on that particular occasion to discuss something to do with Vietnam, with the situation with Vietnam. Now, that is not reflected in the written record. It is on the audio recording. Does that refresh your recollection at all? Did your father's trip to Phnom Penh, that final trip, have anything to do with a discussion regarding the situation, that is the conflict between Cambodia and Vietnam. And please don't answer the question. My colleague is about to object.
The President, witness, please hold on. International Court Prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not necessarily opposed to the question, but rather the prologue which preceded the question, which could possibly influence the witness and the references made. I don't believe it is appropriate at all to introduce such subjects, which could have been made at a previous stage had the defense sought to. And based on what has already been said, what has been recorded, the defense should be in a position to tell us exactly which extracts from the audio transcript they are referring to, which ERNs are being referred to, and verify that such words were indeed spoken at the interview before the investigators. Thank you, Mr. President.
If I could just respond very briefly. First of all, the purpose of the prologue was not in any way to influence the witness. The purpose of the prologue was perhaps a futile attempt to influence the trial chamber, who seems time and again uninterested in the shortcomings of the judicial investigation. So that was the reason for that comment, for the prologue, as my colleague put it. The transcript that I'm working from is it's a transcript that was prepared by a member of our staff, a member of our team, and that individual listened to the audio record and made a note of this. So perhaps I'll just ask the witness again. Mr. Witness, do you recall, and if you don't, simply tell us, that the purpose of that trip had something to do with the conflict in Vietnam? And again, I'm going to have to ask you not to answer the question, because another one of my colleagues is about to object.
The President's counsel for the civil parties, you may now proceed.
Mr. President, once again I need the references of the hearing with this gentleman. The defence's notes are not adequate, and I would like to have the precise references. Thank you.
The President, counsel for Mr. Nguyen Chie, you are now instructed to provide the reference you cite to both the chamber and the parties to the proceeding. That's first point. Secondly, you may proceed putting some specific questions, and that you are instructed to avoid making any lengthy comments that may influence the witness. We have already received observation from the prosecution on this, and that please expedite your line of questioning by not going into that again.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will indeed be brief. I've already given the indication of the reference number. It's document E3/58, and as we all know, on the file are audio recordings of all of those documents. So this would be naturally D125/160. That is the previous designation given to this document before the OCIJ. 160R for recording, I believe, is the terminology that's been used all along since the beginning of these proceedings. So just to make it clear, it's the audio recording of that statement that I read out. Again, I'm just interested. I'm trying to refresh the witness's recollection, if that's possible. If not, that's fine. So again, Mr. Witness, let me very simply and briefly repeat the question. Do you recall telling the investigators of the OCIJ that the purpose of that trip, the reason for that trip, was in order to discuss something to do with a conflict between Cambodia and Vietnam. Don't simply tell us, that's fine.
The President, lead co-lawyer for the civil party, you may now proceed.
Mr. President, I don't know if my learned friend is doing this on purpose, but he is giving us the references of the record of the hearing with the investigating judge, and he is pointing out discrepancies with what was registered. So perhaps he should show us what was actually recorded rather than simply giving us the code of the document. Thank you.
Well, I'll just add that I indeed do everything on purpose here. That reference was, in fact, to page 4. I believe I said that already. I read out the ERNs of that particular question. Now, as we all know, but perhaps as the public and commentators on this tribunal do not know, that question and answer, that single question and answer, is actually an amalgamation of many, many questions and answers, with portions omitted, portions embellished, portions left out, portions expanded upon, all sorts of things. We're all aware of this. So it's very difficult. I would have to spend the next 20 minutes.
The President, Counsel, please hold on. The President, International Co-Prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. So that the Nyunchia defense can be fully conversant with what is normally done in this chamber, normally one gives the R letter code and also the time, minute and second when the exchange took place. I think the Nyunchia defense might like to draw on Khieu Sampan's defense practice, which provided the parties with 3 extracts, 3 partial transcripts of the audio document relating to the Campan record. And so we have the translation in French and English from Khmer, and we have a reference, and we can identify page numbers and times and minutes, hours and minutes of recordings. Mr. President, can I also point out that once again in its last statement, the Nyunchia defense once again began to make comments about the quality of the transcripts and records and the way in which they have been produced, which had been banned by the chamber just before, and I would request that he abstains from making such comments in the future with a view to influencing the thinking of the witness. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I would just respond very briefly to those points. First of all, with respect to what normally transpires on this stage, I don't think what transpires on this stage has been normalized in any sense. I think we see a variation of procedures that change, I would say, sort of by the day, by the witness. However, I will move on. I accept that the Q Sampan team has been submitting transcripts of audio recordings, and I think that's an excellent practice. We have done that in the past. Unfortunately, at times, this is cross-examination and things move quickly. So we listened to this last night and this morning in preparation for our cross-examination based on questions that were asked by Judge Laverne yesterday. So the suggestion that we should have presented some kind of a transcript, again, that we should behave as mind readers, as this chamber likes to think sometimes, it doesn't hold. I didn't know I was going to use this yesterday. I decided to do it yesterday. And I asked one of my team members to helpfully produce a transcript to assist me in the questioning of the witness. Now, I will certainly submit a request to the ITU that portion be transcribed and placed on the case file so that we can then that later. I'm simply asking the witness now and informing him in good faith, based on what my team member has told me, that the record itself, the audio record, contains a reference to a meeting in Vietnam. So if the witness remembers that, fine. If the witness doesn't remember that, that's fine. That's outside of my control. So perhaps I could just put the question one more time to the witness. He could give us the answer, whatever answer he's going to give us, and I'm not trying to influence him in any way. And then we will make the request and have the transcript placed in the file. So, Mr. Witness, again, one last time, and please don't take anything that I've said to influence you in any way. Do you remember telling the investigators of the OCIJ that the purpose of that meeting had something to do with a conflict between Cambodia and Vietnam?
Response: No, I don't.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Witness. I'll now move on to another topic I'm still within the communication structure. I'd like to discuss now for a little while particular communications. Nothing in the abstract, nothing in general, but particular communications, and that would include telegrams, conversations, letters, whatever correspondence that you yourself engaged in. So I'm, again, as always, interested in your personal experience. Over the course of these days, you've told us quite a bit about some of those communications. And indeed, you told us that members of your family, your father, your brother, and your sister were also involved in the communication structure to various degrees. And you were also shown several telegrams by the international co-prosecutor and Judge Laverne. So I would like to ask you a few questions about specific communications. And again, please limit your answer to your personal experience, your personal knowledge, or anything that those members of your family that you worked with may or may not have told you. And that is also your personal experience in my submission. So I will end my prologue, and I would just like to say that for my part, I will limit my questions to issues of prominence and actual relevance in this trial. That is in case 002/01, and that is obviously the evacuation of Phnom Penh and those population movements, what we refer to as second wave, which are said to have taken place between April 75 and late 1976, and in a few cases, early 1977. So with that as a background, let me turn to those core issues of the case,
The President, Judge Cartwright, you may proceed.
President, Mr. Iannuzzi, you've been asked repeatedly to stop making comments, or as you call them, prologues or submissions. Please ask questions, and please keep your questions brief and slow, because we will be unable to use much of what you ask the witnesses if they can't be translated. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I do apologize to the translators if I've been speaking too quickly. So again, Mr. Witness, I'm going to ask you, as I've just been instructed, some questions, and I'm going to keep them short. And they are going to relate, as I've said, to the core issues in this case. So my first question, as far as you are aware, or did you, your father, your brother, or your sister, as far as you know, have any communication with Nuon Chea regarding the evacuation of Phnom Penh?
Response. I don't know anything about this, but I learned that there was contact by my father with him.
Could you be a bit more specific about that? What kind of contact are you talking about?
Response. I did not know what could have been the content of their communication, but they did meet.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. Now, I need to clarify something. You've just said that you did not know the content of their communication, but the question was whether or not they had communicated with respect to the evacuation of Phnom Penh, and you said that indeed your father and Nuon Chea had done so. So just let me make sure I've got this clearly. To your knowledge, did your father and Nuon Chea communicate specifically about the evacuation of Phnom Penh? And if so, how do you know that?
Response. I don't know anything about this.
Very well, thank you. Let me move on now, Mr. Witness, to what we, the parties, refer to as the second phase of the population movement. And that phase consists of several alleged instances of population movement said to have taken place around September 1975, continuing into 1976, and in certain outlying instances, 1977. Did you, your father, or your brother or sister, to your knowledge, have any communication with Nuon Chea regarding population movements with respect to the southwest zones or the central zones?
Response. No, I don't know. I was too young to know about this.
Thank you. What about the east zone or the west zone? Did you, your father, your brother, or your sister, to your knowledge, have any communication with Nuon Chea regarding population movements in those zones, the west or the east zone?
The President, witness, could you please hold on? Madam Simonofox, you may now proceed.
On that last question, Mr. President, I would like to make an objection or ask that my colleague proceed differently, because he's raising a question about the father or sibling of the witness himself. So I want the question to be put to the witness concerning the witness himself rather than about the members of his family, because that could lead to confusion.
I'm happy to do that. But before I do, I would just like to state that, in my estimation, 80% or more of what this witness has been telling us throughout his testimony has related specifically to his work with his father, and he's been telling us time and again things that his father told him, things that he learned from his father. So I will happily break it up, but I don't think there's anything wrong asking us. This witness, in my submission, is here as an agent of his father, in a sense. That's what he's been telling us. That's what the record reflects. So I will proceed. Again, Mr. Witness, did you individually, personally, yourself, engage in any communication with Nuon Chea regarding population movements in the east or the west zones of Cambodia, of the country, of Democratic Kampuchea, excuse me?
Response: I don't know about this.
What about your father or your brother or your sister? Did they ever tell you that they engaged in communications with Nuon Chea regarding population movements in the east or the west zone?
Response: no.
Thank you. What about Sector 106? That's the Siem Reap sector. Did you ever engage in any lines of communication with Nuon Chea regarding population movements into or out of Sector 106, the Siem Reap sector?
Response: I'm afraid I don't quite understand your question. Could you please repeat it? Because I had nothing to do with the work in Siem Reap.
That's fine, Mr. Witness. I'll accept that answer. What about the work in the northwest zone, including Battambang, Pursat, and Banteminchi province? Did you engage in any lines of communication with Nuon Chea regarding those areas?
Response: no. I was too young again to know anything about this.
Thank you. What about Kampong Thom and Kampong Cham provinces? Did you engage in any lines of communication with Nuon Chea regarding those areas?
Response: I'm afraid not.
That's okay, Mr. Witness. Now, just for the sake of completeness, did you engage in any lines of communication with Nuon Chea from late 1977 up until 1978 with respect to any population movements in the East Zone?
Response: no, I didn't.
Thank you. Now I'm going to ask you a question about the telegrams that were put to you. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the co-prosecutor, the international co-prosecutor, I believe he discussed 5 particular telegrams with you, and I'm sure he will correct me if I'm wrong, and I believe Judge Laverne, I don't remember exactly, it was 3 or 4. Let me ask you one question and see if you can answer it, and then if not, we can try something else. If you recall, did any of those telegrams that were shown to you, any of them, have anything to do with population movements?
Response: No, I don't understand the message to be relevant to that.
Very well, thank you. And now, Mr. Witness, I just wonder if you would be surprised to know that there is not a single allegation in the closing order of any forced population movement either into or out of Sector 105 in Mondulkiri province. Not a single allegation in the indictment that we are trying this case on today. Would you be surprised to know that?
The President witness is now instructed to hold on. National co-lead lawyer for the civil parties, you may now proceed. Counsel Pek Ong. Thank you, Mr. President and Your Honors. We have observed that some questions put by counsel for Nuon Chea to the witness, in particular the current question is put to confuse the public. The questions were inviting the witness to even make comment concerning the procedural matters in this court, which is not relevant at all. The President, the co-prosecutor, you may now proceed.
I do believe, Mr. President, that last question should be reworded so that no comments are made on the contents of the closing order with respect to Sector 105, but rather as to whether the witness has any knowledge on this subject, if the defence is interested in that, of course. But comments on the closing order are not required. We should ask him questions about what he knows about Sector 105 or about Phnom Penh with respect to the time he spent there. Thank you.
Let me respond first to my colleague from the civil parties across the stage. I was not intending to mislead the public in any sense. I was intending, quite frankly, to alert the public that a good deal of the testimony we've been hearing is not particularly relevant to the communication structures as they relate to the underlying crimes at issue in this trial. I personally find that strange, and I wanted to know if the witness himself found that strange, because it seems to me that if we're interested in things like communication structure or administrative structure, there ought to be some nexus. There ought to be a nexus between those structures and the underlying crimes that we're talking about. We're not doing a trial in theory. What may have happened there, what may have happened there. Everything that comes into court should be relevant, tied to, relating to the crimes, the base crimes. And those crimes, the base crimes, are clearly, and I don't think anyone can contradict me on this.
The President, the Chamber has already heard enough. The objection are sustained. Witness is not here bound to make any comments concerning the procedures in the closing order as to which particular facts are at issue. Counsels are advised to put questions relevant to the matters as stated in the paragraphs of the closing order in the confinement of case file 002/1, and everyone is aware of this.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will move on to some areas which we consider highly relevant to our case and which may be within this witness's sphere of knowledge. Mr. Witness, you've told us about the various locations where you've resided over the course of your life. If I could take you back to the period approximately from 1969 until 1973, and you've given testimony already before the Chamber about these periods. You've told us where you lived. During that time, did you personally experience any bombings by the United States of America of Cambodia?
Response: Yes, I did. I think everyone did.
When you say everyone, do you mean everyone in Cambodia?
Response: Yes, that's correct. That's what I presumed.
Thank you. Are you able to describe those bombings in some detail? Are you able to give us, based on your personal experience, an experience you say that was most likely shared with the entire country, are you able to give us some information about the intensity of those bombings?
Response: I'm afraid I don't understand the question. It would be good if you rephrase it.
Indeed, Mr. Witness, I apologize for that. For example, how many bombings did you experience? Let's start there, if you remember.
Response: I knew only what happened at my region. I could hear bombs being dropped almost on a daily basis.
On a daily basis. Is that what you said, Mr. Witness?
Response: Yes, I did.
Thank you. Now, do you know, is it within your knowledge, either something you experienced directly or something perhaps that was told to you by a member of your family, do you know whether or not those bombs, those American bombs, destroyed the rice fields in Cambodia, in your area?
Response: Yes, they did.
Thank you.
I did not just hear what they told me about this, but I saw this firsthand. At that time, people had built a trench or bunker at every home, and they had to make sure they can cook their rice early in the morning so that they could eat the rice for the whole day when they took refuge in the bunkers.
And just so I have it clearly, they were taking refuge in those bunkers to avoid being killed or injured by those bombs. Is that correct?
Response: Yes, it is.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. One last question on this point. To your knowledge, to your personal knowledge, did any Cambodians die, lose their lives as a result of those bombings by the United States of America?
Response: Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. Now, if I may, turn to something that you told us, and I can be very brief here. You did mention, and I believe it was on your first day of testimony on Tuesday, that you encountered Tamok at B20. Did I get you correctly? Is that right? Did you encounter Tamok during your time at B20?
No, that is not correct. I did not encounter with Tamok.
Thank you. Did you ever encounter Tamok?
No, I didn't.
Thank you. If I may turn, and this will be the last time I refer to one of your statements. And this, I believe, is the most recent statement you gave to the Office of the Co-Investigating Judges, and I believe the civil parties made quite a bit of use of this one. It contains a lot of information with respect to Yang Tirit. However, on one particular page of this document, and this again is E3/447, and I apologize, I only have the English ERNs, but I have a very, very simple question. The page I'm looking at is English ERN 00486512. And you said in that statement of the 28th of February 2010, you mentioned that, and I'm quoting, Suon, Kit Chun, and Sao Kim Mut also worked with Yang Seri. So my question is, who is Kit Chun?
That I do not know. When they went to ask, when they visited us, they did ask us a question about this person and that person, and I told them that I did not know them personally. I only heard their names, but I did not have any personal contacts or knew them personally.
Do you remember telling the investigators that Kit Chun, as well as those two others, worked with Yang Seri? Do you remember that? Do you remember any discussion of Kit Chun with the OCIJ?
No, I don't.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. And perhaps I'm mispronouncing that name, so just so it's very clear, that individual is the current Minister of Finance in the Royal Government of Cambodia. Does that refresh your recollection at all?
No, I do not recall.
Thank you. And one last question on this point. Have you heard, are you familiar with the fact that the Minister of Information in Cambodia, whose name apparently you don't remember, has refused to cooperate with this tribunal? Have you heard that in recent...
President, witness needs not respond to this question. It is not relevant at all.
Well, I believe I'm on record as saying why I believe that's relevant, so I will move on. Just a few more questions, Mr. Witness, and I will cede the floor to my colleague. Let's, if we could, turn back just for a moment to the issue of forced movement of the Cambodian population. And you've told us quite a bit about your experience at K-17, Ka Dop Prom P, I believe is how that's pronounced in Khmer. Can you tell us anything about population movements with respect to Kor Prom?
President, prosecutor, you may proceed.
Thank you, President. I believe that the witness appreciates that my esteemed colleague is trying to attempt speaking Khmer, but I don't believe that for the other parties we were not able to understand exactly what Kaprom was. Would my colleague be so obliging as to express himself in a language that we can all understand?
Excuse me, I would be happy to do that. Kaprom is K5, and I believe that's well known to all of us here. Mr. Witness, what can you tell us about population movements with respect to K5 or Kaprom that may have occurred in the northwest of Cambodia in the 1980s? What can you tell us about that, if anything?
President, witness needs not answer to this line of questioning because it is completely irrelevant.
Well, I will have to insist on this point because it is relevant. It is relevant to the number of deaths that may have been
You are not allowed to comment any further. You may move on to a more specific question. If we grant leave for the witness to respond to the questions, we would not interrupt your line of questioning. But if we find that the question is irrelevant, then we will advise the witness accordingly, and the decision has already been made that you are not allowed to put this line of questioning to the witness. You may move on.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will move on to my final question. Before I do that, I'd just like to make a request for clarification. Is the reason that I'm not allowed to explore K5 because many of the crimes that were committed during K5 are similar to...
The issue has already been ruled upon, and the witness has been directed not to respond to the question because the question is irrelevant. The question is completely irrelevant to the alleged facts concerning the co-accused. And I repeat, the question is irrelevant to the alleged facts against the co-accused.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will move on then to my last question. Mr. Witness, on Tuesday, and this is indeed my last question, on Tuesday, when testifying about a certain meeting that took place at the stadium in Phnom Penh in May 1975, you indicated that you did not attend that meeting, however, that you did go to the stadium at night to watch a play. So my question is, what kind of a play was it? Was it in any way similar to the play that's been unfolding here on this stage before this trial chamber?
President, witness needs not answer to this question. President, Counsel, you may move on to the next question. Otherwise, your act is amounted to a contempt of the court.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will move on. I'm only trying in my own boorish way to suggest that if the trial chamber continues to work from a script with cues and stage directions, these proceedings take on all the dignity of a very bad... a very bad Gilbert and Sullivan was the end of the quote.
Please be seated. The judge is now deliberating. You may sit down.
Mr. President, that's all I had for the witness. Thank you, Mr. Witness.
Sit down. The chamber has not granted you any the floor to raise any other issue. The chamber needs to rule upon this issue. President, please rise counsel for Mr. Nuon Chea.
ដោយលោកមេធាវីបានរំលោភ
The chamber finds that lawyer has abused the proceeding and he has contempted the court despite repeated warning by the chamber throughout the course of the proceeding, and today it is very obvious that the lawyer is intending to obstruct the proceedings, and the counsel is also abusing the proceeding. The chamber, therefore, decides to dispel you from this proceeding.
Do you mean that I should leave, Mr. President?
ត្រូវហើយ
Yes, you must leave the courtroom for today, pursuant to Rule 38, one of the internal rules on the misconduct of lawyers. You must leave the courtroom now. You are not allowed to make any comment.
I believe I will remain with my client.
លោកចាក់ចេញ
You must leave now. Again, the chamber orders that counsel leave the courtroom for today, and as for the next day, the chamber will issue the decision accordingly.
ព្រះបញ្ជាកងកម្លាំងសន្តិសុខ
Security guards are instructed to ensure the order of this courtroom, and security guards are instructed to escort Mr. Andrew Anutsi, the defense lawyer for Mr. Nuon Chea, out of this courtroom.
I will await my escort.
President, Counsel Sunarun, do you have any questions to put to the witness at question now? Counsel Sunarun. Good morning, Mr. President, and good morning, Your Honors. I have prepared my questions to put to the witness, and it may take approximately 40 to 50 minutes. And I look at the clock, there remains approximately 9 to 10 minutes. I await your decision. President, you may proceed and try your level best to put your question. Counsel Sunarun. Good morning, witness Panwan. My name is Sunarun. I am the National Counsel for Mr. Nuon Chea. I would like to follow up with the question from my international colleague, Mr. Andrew Inutsi. I would like to go back a little bit to your background. I know that the prosecutors and other parties have asked questions about your backgrounds, but I am not clear with certain points, so I would like to ask for further clarification. You said you joined the revolution led by the Khmer Rouge forces. I would like to know, how old were you when you joined the revolution? Response. As I mentioned from the start, I joined the revolution along with my father since I was very young. Question. Yeah, that's the point. I am asking you to tell me exactly how old you were when you joined the revolution. Can you please be more precise? Response. I do not recall. I joined the revolution since I was very young. I do not recall it. I, at that time, joined my father. Question. You then became a messenger for your father. When did you become a messenger for your father? Response. I do not understand your question. Are you talking about my job as a messenger in the revolution, or for my father? Counsel. You told the court earlier on that you joined the revolution, and first you serve as a messenger for your father. So that is the point I would like to seek clarification. When did you become a messenger for your father? Response. As I said earlier, I cannot recall the exact date, but after I left from the place and I returned to work with my father, I became a messenger. It was after the war. Question. Prior to the war or after the war, which period are you referring to? Is it after 1975 or before 1975? Response. It was before 1975. Question. Apart from being the messenger for your father, did you have any other portfolio? No, I didn't. I worked as messenger all along until my father passed away. Question. You testified in the court earlier on that your relation with Madame Ieng Theret, and you was once a driver for Madame Ieng Theret, and at the time Mr. Nuon Chea communicated via telegrams with Sector 105, and you said that Mr. Nuon Chea normally discussed security matters in those telegrams. Can you enlighten the court what security was all about that Mr. Nuon Chea communicated with Sector 105? What do you mean by security matters, and how were security matters handled at that time? Response. The term security at that time, we have to put it in context. At that time, there were fighting between Khmer soldiers with the Vietnamese soldier. So security matters was all about the conflict between the two sides.
លោកចម្លើយរបស់លោកនេះខ្ញុំនៅ
Question. I do not really get your answer. You mentioned security matters was the subject of communication between Mr. Nguyen Chia and Sector 105, and you mentioned that security was all about the conflict between Vietnamese troops and the Cambodian troops. But what was security entailed? Response. It's rather difficult to explain briefly. Security need to be explained, as you said just now. It encompasses the order and general security, the killing, the fighting, so on and so forth. There were forces who did not get along with each other, and then they took refuge in the jungle and they were resisting. Those were also part of the security piece and puzzle. And you may ask them for the details. I think that those uncles also knew me, and they knew my father as well. So if you wanted to find out what security matters entailed, then you had better ask them. Question. In document, in the hand of the court, there were a lot of telegrams communicating between Sector 105 and Office 870. And in those telegrams, there were the undersigns by the name of Chan and other names. And those telegrams were number 1133 or 3, so on and so forth.
Can you tell the chamber, please, whether these telegrams are the communications made from 105 all the way to Office 870? I believe that you also have access to these telegrams on your desk. Now I'll give you an example to telegram number 3 and telegram 00 and telegram number 2. There are plenty of them. Can you say whether these telegrams were sent from Sector 105 or from elsewhere? Response. Having looked at the telegrams, I can say that they are genuine telegrams. However, I do not know something about the names because at that time it was my sister who was the decoder when I left the work. But the format and the telegrams are genuine. Question. You say that these telegrams are genuine telegrams from 105 sector. Now looking at the telegrams on your desk, you can see that there are some writing and the head of Naga with writing in Khmer Tela. What do you understand the notes to be? Response. In my paper, there is no term tela as you alluded to. The President, Counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari, you may proceed. Counsel Ang Uttam, pardon me, please. Mr. President and Your Honors, I have received the report from my case file manager from downstairs that Mr. Ieng Sari did not observe the proceedings from 11:49 and his heartbeats were irregular as reported also by the doctor. May I ask that we adjourn the meeting, rather the hearing, before we hear update on his medical status. The President, Counsel Sonarun and Counsel Ang Uttam, since it is now appropriate time for adjournment, we would like Counsel Sonarun to prepare his notes and that we now adjourn until 2 p.m. By 2 p.m., the Chamber continues hearing the testimony of civil party Madame Dennis Afonso through video link from Paris. We believe that her testimony will be completed by the end of this afternoon. Mr. Panwan, your testimony has not yet been concluded. The Chamber wishes to summon you to come back tomorrow morning. And this afternoon, if possible, you are also invited to come if we have some time left to give parties to put questions to you. And for the time being, we would like to ask that you remain somewhere near the vicinity of the court so that you can be available for such testimony if time fits. We would like to release you immediately after your testimony is complete because we understand that you need to go about your daily life. And we would like counsel for the witness to also be with us today and tomorrow so that you can give some assistance to him. Counsel Sonarun, you may proceed. Counsel Sonarun, on behalf of my client, I would like to request that my client be allowed to observe the proceedings from his holding cell due to his health concerns because he has some headache and lack of concentration and some lower back pain. The waiver will be submitted to the Chamber in due course. The President, the Chamber notes the request of Mr. Nuon Chea through his counsel in which he has asked that he be allowed to observe the proceedings from his holding cell downstairs due to his health concerns. The request is somehow appropriate and that it is granted. Mr. Nuon Chea is now allowed to observe the proceedings from his holding cell through audio-visual link. Mr. Nunchi has expressly waived his right to be present in this courtroom. The Chamber would like counsel for Mr. Nunchi to submit this waiver, signed or given thumbprint by Mr. Nunchi as soon as possible. AV booth officers are now instructed to ensure that the AV or audio-visual link is well connected into the holding cell where Mr. Nunchi would be observing the proceedings from. Security personnel are now instructed to bring Mr. Nunchi and Khew Sampon to their respective holding cell and have Mr. Khew Sampon returned to the courtroom in the afternoon when the next session resumes at 2 p.m. And the Chamber will notify parties concerning other relevant issues upon receiving information from the doctor who cares for Mr. Ieng Sari. The court is adjourned.